All right, what is going on, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome back to the KC Sports Report. Michael Darcy, your host here as always, and tonight I have the pleasure of having my good friend Lucas Murphy on the show, and we're going to break down if the Chiefs should trade for New York Giants cornerback James Bradberry. So, Lucas, this has been a rumor that has been swirling around the Chiefs Kingdom. The Chiefs have been linked to a few different corners, and New York Giants cornerback James Bradberry has been one of those guys. And, we're going to get into it, but what are your initial thoughts of this idea? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? How you feel about this?
I understand that we need a cornerback, kind of a premier cornerback added to this roster. And, I guess Travarius Ward had that role. We do have L'Jarius Sneed still on the roster. We still have Rashad Fenton. But they're looking, obviously, to add another premier corner. And I can understand why they like James Bradberry. Obviously, he was drafted by the Carolina Panthers in the second round. That right there alone kind of fits Brett Veach's MO of going and getting like kind of that first round, second round pick type of corner. But there's some things that I really kind of dislike. But I understand that this is an option. Some of the things that I don't like are the fact that when he was targeted, he's given up a completion percentage. So I'm just going to speak on 2020 and 2021. In 2020, he was a Pro Bowler. So in 2020, he allowed 61.5% completion percentage. So basically, he was targeted 91 times. And out of that 91 times, he allowed 56 catches for 587 yards. One of the unique things, too, is his passer rating that year when he was a Pro Bowler was 81.2%. The following year, so 2021, he was targeted 115 times, allowing 71 completions for a 61.7% completion rate, and the QB rating against him was 93. Another glaring thing to me is in 2020, when he was a Pro Bowler, he was allowing 10.5 yards per completion, and in 2021, he was allowing 11.9. Now, I do understand that he is a number one corner, and he is going against number one talent. That is also in the NFC East. Before, he was obviously with the Carolina Panthers, so the NFC South. But as of late, he's been facing against the NFC East number one talent. There are some very good receivers, and were some very good receivers in the NFC East during that time period. I just don't know if this is the correct move for the direction we're heading as an organization. We're seeing us peel off some of these older players. James Bradberry is going to be 29 years old. He's obviously going to cost a lot, which I know that's something you're going to talk about.
Yes.
And I'm sure the draft, he's going to take some draft compensation, some draft picks to get, because this is going to have to be a trade. For me, there's other guys, there's other options I would much rather go. But again, I understand if they make this move, it's just not one that I'm excited about.
This does kind of feel like that second wave of free agency. I don't want to say desperate move, but a guy that's not really the first option. He's kind of your second option. And really quickly, before people are like, oh, the Chiefs aren't really linked to him, a report by Nate Taylor of The Athletic stated that the Chiefs are interested. But right now, I think the big hookup on this potential trade is the contract involved. James Bradberry's cap hit in 2022 is $21.9 million. If the Chiefs were to take on that trade, they would be getting $13.5 million of that cap hit. That is not realistic for a 28-year-old cornerback. I don't want to say his best days are behind him, but he's not getting any better. And I think that when you look at it, he's a solid corner. He's got 35 passes defended to 7 interceptions, and he's been a big bright spot on that Giants team that's pretty bad. But I think that if the Chiefs are going to find a way to orchestrate this move, it's got to be for the right price. You cannot give a second or a third round draft pick and pay that $13.5 million to get James Bradberry. That's a terrible look. You've got to find a way to get that cap hit, I would say, under $10 million. And I think he's worth like a fifth, maybe a fourth or a fifth round draft pick. But even then, I'm kind of hesitant because he is 28 years old, and he doesn't have a lot of great years left. And we've already talked about the Chiefs being linked to Stephon Gilmore. I personally think that the Chiefs are going to get one of those two guys. It's either going to be Stephon Gilmore or it's going to be James Bradberry. And I think that right now, it might be James Bradberry because Stephon Gilmore has been offered something by the Chiefs, and he hasn't taken it yet. And I think that the big hookup on this trade, like I said, is right now I think that they're trying to negotiate this cap hit to be much more manageable for the Chiefs. What do you think about that?
I agree. I think from my standpoint, though, is I think you're going to need that leadership, a very good accoladed leader, if you can say that. And I think for me, I would much rather get Stephon Gilmore on this team and probably much rather meet his requirements than trading for the Giants' requirements. The reason I say that is because Stephon Gilmore offers way more than just the ability to play football. He offers the knowledge of playing the cornerback position at the highest level. I mean, you're talking about a defensive player of the year. You're talking about a multiple-time Pro Bowler. And that's kind of what is needed, I feel personally, on this defense and in this secondary. Yes, they had the Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu, and he provided that leadership as a vocal leader. I think this is a completely different standpoint. This is someone who's going to be educational, how to get guys in certain spots as a corner, certain things to look for. I mean, again, you're talking about a former defensive player of the year. James Bradberry doesn't offer that. He definitely is a leader. I mean, he's been one of the best corners on the Giants team, and he's definitely gone against number one talent. But I think when you really break this down, it comes down to that for me. And, some other things to look at, too, from Bradberry's standpoint, some things that I look for are tackling. Tackling from a corner isn't always the be-all or however you look at it. But, in 2020, when he was a Pro Bowler, he had 54 combined tackles. He only missed 9 tackles for a rate of 14.3%. That's pretty solid. In 2021, he had 47 combined tackles, but missed 13 tackles for a 21.7% missed tackle rate. So that rate is going up. Again, not super big of a concern, but those are some things that are kind of pointing out where Gilmore is much less. And so I think for me, if I had to choose and if I had to kind of pick for the Chiefs, I would pick Gilmore, and that's just me.
The only thing that worries me about Gilmore is I think that he's 31, 32 years old, and he's going to want a 3-year deal, and I don't want to pay a 34, 35-year-old cornerback. And I think that, his best days are behind him as well. Right now, the Chiefs are looking for a veteran cornerback, but I think that right now you need to go with what's going to benefit you right now and not the long term. This is not a long-term solution. The long-term solution is going to be filled in the draft. And
Correct.
From your standpoint, having a Stephon Gilmore rather than a James Bradberry would be a better mentor. But I also think that James Bradberry is a good team guy. He was a great fit in New York. It's just that team wasn't any good. And actually,
Correct.
As you were saying that, I looked this up. The Giants are reportedly close to finalizing a trade of James Bradberry. Now, the article doesn't state who the teams are, but right now, it's the Kansas City Chiefs, the Houston Texans, and the Indianapolis Colts are in play. And this report is coming from Pat Leonard of the New York Daily News Reports. So take that with a grain of salt, but I would not be surprised if he is a Kansas City Chief. From what I've seen, the Chiefs are pushing really, really hard to get him. And I think that, both of us, and I don't want to be speaking for you, but we wouldn't be against this trade, but it's got to be for the right price. You cannot give James Bradberry, or you can't give the Giants like a first or a second. Well, they wouldn't give a first, but like a second or a third for James Bradberry when he's 28 years old. You already just talked about some of his tackling and percentage concerns. I mean, he's struggled against some really good receivers, and I don't want to see them take that cap hit on. You've already got to pay Orlando Brown Jr. You let Tyreek Hill walk because you couldn't pay him. Don't be paying a 28-year-old cornerback a ton of money. You know what I mean?
Well, and I look at it, too. I mean, I get that you're trying to make moves that are smart for your defense. And again, I don't want people to take that I wouldn't accept James Bradberry into this, role that he is going to take on. That's not the case. But I think for the money and for what you're potentially having to give up, because I think the highest you would give up would be a third, depending on how much money they eat. I just think that there's better options out there. I would much rather the Kansas City Chiefs take a look at like Roger McCreary from Auburn, and push him into it. If you're truly that concerned about the cornerback position, then make a trade up and go get like a Sauce Gardner. If you're really that concerned about the cornerback position, I personally feel that there's better options out there that aren't going to cost you as much. And again, if he came in here and performed and did his thing, I would be all for it. I mean, obviously, whatever makes the Chiefs better. Clearly, the Chiefs they see something that they're very interested in. So maybe they know that they can fine tune something, or getting him in here and putting him in Spags' scheme may change some stuff. I mean, Spags did coach at the Giants and things like that. So maybe there are some things that they're seeing, and it'll change kind of some of what we're seeing. But I do want to emphasize, I think that there are better opportunities, better options out there for potentially making a trade. But I also still think that there's a lot better options right now currently in the draft.
What's funny that you mentioned better options in the draft, and that kind of goes along with going with cheaper talent that's younger. The Chiefs, at least in the Brett Veach era, have not invested in the cornerback position. So what makes you think they're going to start now? You know what I mean? Like, why would they go out and give Stephon Gilmore $30 million over 3 years? Why would they do that? Why would they go out and give up a second or third round draft pick and eat cap space to take on James Bradberry? Because if they do that, they better be pretty damn sure that this guy's going to work out, because that just doesn't seem like it's worked in previous years, and the Chiefs haven't had to do that. You know what I mean? Like, they haven't had to trade for that big-name corner. I remember Jalen Ramsey was the big guy. Patrick Peterson, my God, I got big on YouTube from talking about Patrick Peterson to the Chiefs. Like, that has been a rumor forever. Like, the Chiefs never bite on those older veteran corners, and it almost makes you think, like, why would they do it now? So I think that there is a good chance we get one of the two. I can't see us personally getting both. I really don't know, because, the injury concern with Gilmore kind of makes me think, and when you look at Bradberry, he's played 31 of his last 32 games. So he's a durable cornerback, but as your numbers and your stats say, he might not be as consistent and as solid as Gilmore. So I think that there's pros and cons to both players, but I think that we are both pretty adamant when we say that if the Chiefs only go out and get a veteran corner and they don't draft one, the Chiefs are going to be in some trouble.
Yeah, I think that they definitely addressed it in this draft. I mean, you have 12 picks. Obviously, I don't factor in or think that they're going to use all 12. I think some are going to be used for trade pieces. But I do envision that a corner will be selected at some point. I mean, we've seen L'Jarius Sneed taken as like a safety corner hybrid option. We saw Rashad Fenton being selected. There are some guys that have been chosen in Brett Veach's time span for corners in the draft, and I think that will definitely be something he addresses. And there's plenty of options in this draft, and that's what's unique. And I can't tell you how many times, Michael, I've banged the table on adding so many more draft pieces in this and draft picks, because I'm like, man, there's so much talent, and the depth of talent in this draft is just incredible. And now we have the most in the NFL, tied to the most, I guess you could say, with 12. And they have an opportunity to really just change things if they want to. That's why I think for me, and again, I don't think there's anything wrong with James Bradberry. I just think that they really, truly could go out and draft a very good corner and work him into the system by signing a Stephon Gilmore, educating him through that type of system, and just making him a good talent. And I think that's the way to do it. And another thing, too, is like if Gilmore's asking too much, maybe structure it to where he gets that money, but he has to earn it through incentives. I mean, there's a lot of things like, the same way a Valdez-Scantling, contract was structured. If he's not living up to it, find a way to get it to where it's basically a buyout in the last year, and he's out the door, and it's not really hurting you. So I think there's some things that they could potentially do to satisfy both sides. Like, hey, Gilmore, you're going to get your money, but hey, we're also, if it's not working out, we're also going to find a way to get out of that. And so I think that they could potentially do that. And I'm hoping that Gilmore ends up in the Chiefs uniform.
I am too. I mean, at this point, I don't really know which one they're going to go with. I think the Gilmore sweepstakes might be out of the reach of the Chiefs, but, it's still possible. Right now, I think the Chiefs are the leaders in the James Bradberry camp. I don't think that anybody else is going to get him if the Chiefs don't. And like I said, I would be okay with it. I know he's got some question marks, but if you're a veteran corner who doesn't have question marks, you don't know if they're going to be able to be consistent next year because they're getting older. And these receivers in the West, they're getting so much better. So you need to have a guy that you're able to throw out there and say, okay, we know that we can at least get some production out of you. We can't have another Mike Hughes. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to have to get guys that are consistent and good, reliable, and it doesn't really matter their age. But you can't spend... Go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, I think you nailed it right there because the AFC West, from an offensive standpoint, the receiving cores have improved so much. I mean, we're seeing Davante Adams. I mean, we're seeing so many guys come to the AFC West, and it's going to be that much more challenging for corners. And do I think James Bradberry is up for that challenge? That's obviously something to be seen, but he is truly going to get tested every single week if he does come to the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean,
but honestly, really quickly, that might be why the Chiefs are trying to go out and get him, because they think, okay, this kid can live up to the test, and they would rather have a veteran in the secondary than have a first or a second round draft pick fighting for their life against Davante Adams.
Yeah, that's crazy because, I mean, the Broncos are loaded with talent. The Chargers clearly have Keenan Allen, and the Raiders get Davante Adams, and you got to think we're playing the Bills, we're playing the Bengals, we're playing. The list goes on and on and on.
The best teams. We are going to play the best teams, and I'm not gonna lie, I don't think anyone would want to be a cornerback right now in Kansas City or even in the AFC West because of all these great receivers. I know I wouldn't want to be.
I guess if you're trying to get paid, that would be the way to go and just perform the best you possibly can, man. That's the only thing.
It's just like holding on for dear life. Just hope and pray that you don't get burned too badly. But the stats that you mentioned about his completion rate and the amount of times that he gets thrown at is kind of concerning because you often throw at corners that you believe you can succeed against. And everyone kind of freaked out at Trayvon Diggs in his fantastic season. I get it, he had a lot of picks, but he gave up 1,000 yards to receivers. So at the end of the day, all right, you got all these picks, but what's the point if you're going to give a 1,000 yards to all these different receivers and you're not really helping your team? Now, obviously, James Bradberry gave up a lot less, in fact, half of that. But again, we need guys that can be consistent and not give up big chunks of yards on every single play.
Yeah, and I think, from an overall corner perspective, in 2020 when he was a Pro Bowler, he did get 3 interceptions. In 2021, he did get four interceptions. So in the last 2 years, he's had 7. But like you said, he's allowed 587 yards when he was a Pro Bowler. So not super terrible. That really is not terrible. But then he's basically almost allowed 1,000 yards in 2021. But the standing out is the fact that he did get 4 picks. So you kind of got to balance things there, and he is getting targeted. Again, in 2021, he was targeted 115 times. Yikes. For a completion of 71, and the completion percentage was 61.7%. That's basically 62% of the time his opponent is catching the football. And that's at a rate of 11.9 yards every time they catch the ball. And that's incredible. So he allowed 8 touchdowns in 2021. These are things that you got to take into consideration.
Yeah, especially if you're thinking about giving up draft capital to get him.
Yeah. So 293 yards after catch. Those are things that you have to really take into consideration. Yeah, maybe they see something on film that they know that they can tweak, or maybe they feel he can fit this system. But those are hard stats that you can actually look at and be like, man, that really did happen.
Yeah, I think you make very great points, and this is something that Chiefs fans should listen to because, everyone says, oh, the Chiefs are going to get Bradberry or Gilmore, and they're going to throw their hands up in the air and scream like, yay. But you need to realize that it's not all sunshines and rainbows, and there are legitimate concerns with James Bradberry, and there probably are legitimate concerns with Stephon Gilmore. I haven't done a full dive into it, but I think that right now the Chiefs are trying to do something to get something in that secondary, and right now they could use a veteran, so they might just have to pay him. Well, not pay him, but trade for him and just deal with the consequences, because they need somebody other than L'Jarius Sneed and Rashad Fenton. That's what they need. And I understand they're going to draft one, but they're going to need a veteran, and I think James Bradberry is probably going to be that guy. I know you're a Stephon Gilmore fan. I like him as well. I think it's going to be James Bradberry. But, Lucas, it's been an honor and privilege to have you on. Do you have any closing thoughts?
I do agree, though. I think that they need to get one of them. And I think that with the way the draft is projected to go, with this, being defensive heavy, I can imagine maybe one or even two corners drafted. And that's what I'm kind of looking forward to. And we'll just have to see, man. We'll have to see how this plays out. We're getting that much closer to the draft. And, maybe within the next couple of days, we'll see one of these guys sign or get traded for, and then we'll really kind of know a future. So
with my luck, I'll post this video tomorrow after he's already signed with the Chiefs. That's just how my luck goes.
That happened to us with Rojo.
Don't remind me. Yeah, I know. It was not fun. But luckily, we kind of already knew that he was going to be a Kansas City Chief. But yeah, I'm slow on the draw, I guess. But Lucas, it's always great to have you on. Where can the people find you?
Guys, I really, really would appreciate if you head over to kcsportsreport.com. We are doing amazing things over there. Pushed out an article today on a receiver that could be taken by the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't want to spoil alert it because I would hope that you guys would go over and check it out. But Western Michigan receiver, hopefully he can find his way to the Kansas City Chiefs. But guys, we're doing a lot of good things over at KC Sports Report, where we just hit basically 2,200 views for a startup, and it's going awesome over there. You guys can also find me at the Beat of KC on Twitter. Some new things are going to be rolling out soon. I'm working on some stuff behind the scenes, so go check it out over there, and you'll be getting some sneak peeks. You can also find me at Inside the Royals. With the season getting ready to kick off, I actually have an article getting published probably by the time you guys are listening to this. And then on top of that, you can find me at Blue Wings Rising. Go Jayhawks. We are in the Final Four. And the final thing is the Royals Rundown podcast with me and Jacob Milham. Guys, we talk all Royals, have all kinds of people come over and do interviews and all kinds of fun stuff. So check out that podcast as well. Hopefully I didn't extend that too long for you, Michael.
I was going to say, you're the busiest man alive. I don't even know how you have time to do this show right now. You're always doing something. And guys, I'm very appreciative of Lucas. The site's popping off. Like, the amount of growth that we've seen from a startup website is really incredible. And you guys are the driving factor as to why we do what we do. And we do appreciate you guys for going over to the site, reading what Lucas has to say, reading what I have to say, just listening to this podcast right now. We definitely appreciate it. And as for me, you can follow me on Twitter. That is at KC Sports Report. Instagram is KC_Sports Report. Obviously, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. We just hit 6.4K subs, so I do appreciate you guys for that one. And until next time, guys, thank you for watching this video, and go Chiefs.